Velkommen til episode 3 av Oppdagelsesreisen rundt Torinokledet. Og Erik Jensen, vi skal igjen få møte noen som har blitt berørt av å jobbe med nettopp dette kledet.
I dag så det en spesial treat, sier vi på engelsk. Altså, I dag får dere noe helt unikt. John Jackson, som man får møte I dag, faktisk en av de som holdt I dette Torinokledet I 1978, som ledet hele denne etterforskningen, noen og 30 vitenskapsmenn. Og det jeg vil utfordre seerne på der, vil jo være I særdeleshet å tenke, hva gjør dette med han som vitenskapsmann? Å forske på denne tematikken her sånn, å kunne være så tett på, at du faktisk tar på det. Kan man komme nærmere Jesus på en måte rent sånn historisk enn det? Altså, vi har jo vært I Israel, og vi har gått der Jesus gikk og alt dette her sånn, men her du veldig tett på det som ganske essensielt da. Hvis dette her da kledet Jesu død og Jesu oppstandelse, for dette her forkynner jo både at han døde etter skriftene, han ble begravet etter skriftene, han sto opp igjen etter skriftene, og her har du liksom kvitteringen. Dette kledet viser jo alle de 3 fasene. Og når du da fysisk kan ta I dette her sånn, det veldig spesielt. Og de hadde altså en omstendelig arbeidsperiode for å så hente så mye materiale som de kunne bare få. Det den eneste som man har jobbet så tett på det Torinokledet som det var tilgjengelig, der man kunne løse litt av det det et sånt tøystykke bakpå, der man kunne løse det og se på andre siden. Og da ser man jo at dette trykket jo bare på en side. Det ikke på den andre siden, det går ikke gjennom. Og det betyr jo at det ikke et maleri, det finnes ikke farge. Og det man konkluderte 100% etter den her, da hadde man testet det med alle mulige redskaper og målapparater som man hadde tilgjengelig da I 1978, og siden har man gjort flere tester på det. Man konkluderer 100%, dette ikke noe maleri. Det finnes ikke antydning til det som av maling på noen som helst måte.
Da setter vi på program 3, og så får du sitte med et åpent hjerte når du får høre hva dette gjorde med Dr. John Jackson.
Da ønsker jeg velkommen til en spesialsending med Torinokledet. Og I dag har vi besøk av en mann som helt unik. Han kanskje en av de mest sentrale personer I hele studiet rundt Torinokledet. John Jackson som her, han var nemlig med I 1978 I det første store forskningsprosjektet, der de fikk faktisk ta på Torinokledet. De fikk studere dette I 5 døgn, og det gjorde de til gangs. De jobbet på skift for å kunne utnytte den tiden som de hadde til rådighet. Men vi skal få høre litt mer om hva dette her har betydd for han, det å være en del av denne forskningen. John, such a pleasure that you would be willing to be on this interview.
Well, I'm very happy to be invited because not the least of which is I've got some Norwegian blood in me.
Yes.
And so about to a 4th level, 1/4, and I revere that very nicely.
I feel the good energy already. You were in Norway for a tour quite some years ago.
Yes, with Jostein
With Jostein and Oddvar.
Yes, and with my wife Rebecca Jackson, who is Jewish, by the way, but she's also Christian at this point.
Absolutely.
And we're both Catholic ourselves. But we were invited to come and give a talk. I think it was to 9 different locations.
Yep.
One of which was very nearby, it was in the vicinity of where my ancestors in Norway lived.
Yep.
And I remember starting my talk in that particular location. I said, I'm going to give you some names, if that's from my family.
Yeah.
And if any of these names mean anything to you, we need to talk after my talk, which we did. And I had a number of them. I think probably 15 who
Beautiful.
came up, and we had a great time. It was very enjoyable. Never met them in my life, but I enjoyed it because we were family.
Yeah. Yeah. You have been in a special place with this Shroud of Turin. In 1978, you were leading a group of scientists, 33?
A number very close to that, yeah.
Yeah.
Something about that order.
Scientists who actually were able to touch the Shroud of Turin for 5 days. And I know you worked around the clock. You had a bunch of gear with you to do all the testing. And basically, everything that we see today is based on the samples and everything that you did back in those days, because there has been nothing like it after that people could touch it in the same way and be that close to the shroud. So tell me about what happened. We have limited time, of course, but tell me about what happened. What was the feeling that you were given access to the actual shroud?
It took a while for us to get that set up, but not very much time. It was, I'd have to say, it was a feeling that of specialness, but it was also a feeling that specialness is not to be replaced by the responsibility to try to get as much good scientific data as we could that we could share with the world. Because I felt, as leader of the team, I was the president of the STIRRUP, Shroud of Turin Research Project team at the time, that it was our job to get the best data we could at that moment that could give us new understanding about this really very profound relic object that we have.
But you collected a lot of data during those days. And the reason we get new data at this conference is basically we have new methods to read the data that you took.
In fact, yes. In fact, one of my presentations that we give, I gave 3 here at the conference, dealt with the idea that we have this we have the data that was, as it was given to us or taken in Turin, Italy in 1978, October. But we're also trying to use that data in that talk to try to analyze another fragment thought to be from the shroud, and to see what correlations we might be able to make. So we had to adapt to do that, the techniques to those that were used to get the data. So, and in some of the cases, that was pretty, that was a challenge to do that. But yeah, it was an interesting.
In 1981, you started to publish the data from the research, and it made the world news.
In fact, I'm going to say something about the 1981 first. Our testing was in 1978,
Yeah.
October 8th through 13th, 1978. And exactly 3 years later, we then were able to then talk publicly, publish publicly about our findings. But it was 3 years because we all signed an agreement collectively in our team that we were to hold that our discussions, our research, confidential. And we did that because we felt the importance of it, but we didn't want to make half-baked, if you will, conclusions. So that was the 1981. So that's why it was 1981 was 1981 because it was
Yes.
3 years
Yeah.
from 78 to do that.
But then I heard your talk, and you said, then 1988, C14, that changed everything,
Yes.
in a sense.
Well, it's always going to change things, but the 1988 was actually held almost exactly 10 years to the day, to the month, when we released the data or the conclusion of the carbon-14 process was made public. We've been thinking about it ever since. We have ideas about it, but if I may, the problem that we had was with that 1988 radiocarbon measurement. I call it a measurement.
Yep.
And that's the data collection, but the interpretation of that data,
Which is the most important part. It's the interpretation of the data.
which is where you get a date number. You have a theory of that you have to make, but the problem is, in retrospect, that the team that did the radiocarbon date used to be part of Stirrup, and agreed to be part of our request at that time to do some major testing on the shroud. And we wanted to do this because we had questions from it, and we wanted to go back with new techniques, new data, same people with, and maybe some other new people on a new team. So we made a proposal, but what was decided, and I don't think this is a good decision, but it was decided that only the radiocarbon date was going to be performed. As soon as that happened, then the radiocarbon daters decided that they could just do this alone. What we would have done is we would have analyzed the background of that sample, and so we would be able to have data, scientific data, to understand the results, whatever they were going to be. And as it turns out, the scientific community that did the dating of the shroud then were in a position where they could peer review themselves.
Yeah.
And that's not a healthy situation.
That's not good science.
No, it's against the scientific method. And so people may wonder, well, why can't we do anything about that? Well, because the answer is because we weren't part of the peer review process.
Correct.
And we would have had corroborative data to help us deal with that, which we would have made public, and so then the world would have had it. But that was not the way it was done, and so we're still having to endure I think from a scientific point of view, the bad fruits of that decision.
Yeah. Let's move on from the technical part, because there's a lot of things we could say. There's the Stirrup investigation, 78, the publication in 81, the C14 release in 88 that said this is a medieval forgery. But this has not stopped the investigation, because you had a plethora of areas that you presented in 81, and they only had one, C14, interpreting the data from the test. But you have continued. I'm going to talk to Joseph Marino tomorrow, and he has written a big book about the C14 and how they broke the protocols. But there has been going on an ongoing research. So where do you kind of conclusively say, in a sense, where do you stand today? What is your conviction?
Well, let me just make one thing, if I understood correctly.
Yeah.
We did not, although the C14 was going to be just part of our general research plan. In when we did our proposal in 1984 for having to look at the shroud again, we were not part of the radiocarbon measurement.
I know.
Yeah, I just want to make that clear.
Yeah, no, we know that was done by the
Yes.
Oxford University, and there was two other places that were supposed to work with
Switzerland
it.
and the University of Arizona.
Yeah,
And so now, what we've had to do because we didn't have, well, for example, what's the chemical environment? And these are issues that came up
Yeah.
in trying to understand the radiocarbon date, because quite frankly, you have to look at that date relative to what we do know about the shroud, and you try to take that, and you'd like the date, all the science to come together, but it's not doing that. It's sort of colliding with each other.
Yeah.
And we have to reconcile that. What's going on? Because we have other research that if you take the carbon-14 out of it, this shroud looks like it's a first century realistic, real cloth that was itself a witness to the entire 3 days from the Last Supper through the Passion and through the Resurrection.
So scientifically today, you would say that we have so much data now supporting that this is the real thing.
Yeah, I think
that we have kind of gone around, we've proven things about the C14, but we also gone around and used other methods of dating it.
Yes,
back
it just
to
seems like
the time of
there's
Jesus.
nothing that we can offer that is contrary, gives the contrary conclusion like carbon-14 did. So the question is, how do we resolve that? What science is not designed to do, real science, is to have two camps. In this case, the carbon-14 camp, and the other is the Stirrup or scientific camp. And then they sit there and beat on each other like that. That's not the way it works.
No.
What's supposed to happen is when you have differing concepts or hypotheses about the shroud that is coming from those two camps, what you do is you try to construct a new experiment that can discriminate between the two.
Yeah.
And so that's where we've had to go, and we've come up with some interesting ideas, I think.
Are you the one that came up with the coins on the ice?
Actually, I was.
That's what I thought.
And you want to hear about that a little bit?
Yeah, a little bit, not too long, because we want to
Okay.
talk about how this affects you personally.
Yeah. Well, the coins came from looking at the shroud. And this is one of these pieces of data that makes the shroud really be a very unique thing scientifically. The day that we had discovered how good the three-dimensional image, which correlates body cloth distance to intensity, which is encoded into the image structure as information.
So this is a 3D picture. The shroud is actually a three-dimensional picture. That's what you found out.
It's a three-dimensional picture when you convert the image intensities that make the image into vertical relief to give you that third dimension to the two that are on the cloth. You get this three-dimensional image.
Yes.
And that's natural to the shroud. It's part of the what caused the image to be there.
Which is incredible if it was a medieval forgery, because that guy had to be super genius to make it such a forgery.
Well, you mentioned that. We've done experiments.
You can't do it.
I have a publication in the Journal of Applied Optics in 1984 that talks about that very thing, looking at different mechanisms that might have caused that image. And one of them was the artist. And so we took some criminal artists. Now, not that they're criminals, they're forensic artists.
Yeah.
And so their job is to make realistic imagery. And we gave them intensities that we purposefully encoded 3D core information into. And then they were to use that to make a three-dimensional image. They did it, and then we could subject that to the digital equipment that we do to the shroud, which looks wonderful, really very realistic. And boy, you got to see some of those images. They're deformed in the third dimension. I mean, if you saw somebody looking like the three-dimensionally look like that, you'd want to pray for them. I mean, it's
yeah. But back to the coins. So there's a 3D image, and when you looked at the 3D image, you discovered something on the eyelids.
there was something there that was showing up in the three-dimensional reconstruction. But today, I actually suggested maybe they were coins, but at that time, but to this day, I don't use that very often to discuss things, because there's issues with respect to the intensity versus distance fall off that really work against that idea in terms of trying to read inscriptions, because the inscriptions would be incredibly thick.
Yeah.
At the same, if you follow the same intensity cloth body distance curve on the shroud that we've measured on the shroud.
What is the most convincing thing for you when it comes to the shroud? What makes you really, this is it?
There's actually a number of things that we've done.
Of course.
That I
What
think
is the most?
What is the most? I think the most convincing to me is what the shroud says about the image formation. Now, the reason that's important to me is because, see, what we have to understand is the Gospels were written by Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. None of them, or no human being has ever been recorded that actually saw and witnessed what the resurrection event that has changed the world through Christianity. What was it? How did it happen? And how do we think about that in a physical sense? Well, it turns out that we do have a witness to that. It's the shroud, which is the shroud. The shroud, if it's authentic, it was there. It wrapped the resurrection. It wrapped the body of Jesus. And then the real challenge is, how do we do that? How do we read that information to tell us? Because something created that image, and it seems that would have to be associated in some way with the idea of the resurrection. So that, to me, is the most fundamental and most important. It's also the most challenging,
of course,
to do it.
Now, you have done a lot to the shroud, but what has the shroud done to you?
Well, the shroud is a
You've given your
challenge.
whole life to study this. So what has it done to you?
It's a challenge. It's kept me to be my try to keep focused in a Christian life, to be able to do what's God would expects me to do, as taught to us by our Lord and Savior Jesus. It's propelled me to want to use my retirement, which I am in that phase now, as to make it a holy retirement, that I can try to help others with their faith. Not that I'm trying to say that the shroud is the source of faith. In our teachings of our church, it's the eyewitness accounts of the risen Christ. And on the shroud, you're not looking at the risen Christ. I think if it's authentic, you're looking at the rising Christ.
That's an interesting view.
And that's got to be profound.
Yeah.
And anybody who's concerned about themselves spiritually and what lies beyond, in the beyond, when we get to that point when that happens, we don't want to wait till the last moment. I mean, the shroud is a challenge to our intelligence, as Pope John Paul XXIII, or John Paul II said, sorry. It's a challenge to us to look at ourselves with the relationship to God. And I'm not in any way saying that I'm successful at that. But it's always been a challenge, and I'm glad that God has given us this challenge. I think it's good. I think it's for good. I think it's for good for us, all of us.
Yeah, it's an incredible witness, and as you say, also it's the actual eyewitness that was there, or in a sense, witness that was actually there when Jesus rose from the dead.
Yes, if that shroud is authentic, and I always say that, not because
What's your if there?
I'm doing it for the benefit of the person hearing me,
Okay.
because I want to give them the idea that I'm not expecting them to
Okay.
come to the same conclusions that I have.
Yeah.
So I want to give them, and I think that's respectful to the person's free will, their judgment.
Of course. Yeah.
But what I do feel responsible for is to talk about how we think about the shroud and why we think the way we think.
Yeah.
And that comes from their actual studies.
Yeah. John, I know that we could have continued our conversation the full day and more, because you have such a wealth of information. Thank you so much for being on this program and sharing your information in a few seconds almost.
Yes. Well, I'm hoping, thank you very much for inviting me. I wanted to jump at the chance, by the way, because
Yeah, I'm so happy.
I mean, I've got part of my genetics are in Norway.
Yeah.
Are from Norway.
And we should honor that.
and I hope that all my genetic relatives over there in Norway are and then those people that they touch and so forth
Absolutely.
will be drawn closer to God and our Lord Jesus
We will
Christ.
make sure to publish it so people know that you're on the show so they can watch into it. John, thank you so much. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Da vi ferdig her for denne gang. Du har møtt John Jackson. Han var en av de som originalt med og forsket på dette linkledet i 1978. Du kan finne mer om dette her på torinokledet.no. Der må du gå inn og så kikke på de bøkene som skrevet og referansene som og det mye å glede seg over. Dette det første vitne til Jesu oppstandelse. Det kan være verdt å få med seg og studere litt mer. Vi sier takk for i dag. Herren med deg. Takk for at du så på.